CuteBerryCharms, and this is actually going to be my first video of 2016. I know it's kind of late into 2016 now to just be doing my very first video of the year, but I just really haven't had very much time to do anything clay or drawing related recently. But I'm hoping to get back into it really soon because obviously I really miss it. But I thought my first video would, I would make my first video something that I'm kind of hoping to get into a little bit, which is kind of like a beginner series. And I know that there's various other brilliant artists and stuff that do like beginner series and stuff, but it's just kind of, I think it's always kind of nice to see how different people do things differently. So I kind of thought that that might be something that I would give a try as well, because I sometimes get people on Instagram asking me how I do certain things and if I can give them some advice. So although I'm in no way a professional in clay or in drawing or anything like that, these are just kind of things that I've learned for myself and kind of taught myself. So I think this first video is just going to be about the tools that I use and stuff for clay related stuff, but then after that I might also do a few videos about like different techniques and stuff like that, and I am wanting to do a lot more clay tutorials this year as well. I'm thinking one of the things is going to be some series on chibis, which again quite a few people on Instagram last year asked me to do tutorials on, so I'm really hoping to do some of those this year, which would be really, really fun. But also if you guys have any requests for things that you'd like me to do this year, just let me know in the comments or let me know on Instagram, because I'd really like to know what you guys would like to see the most, so that I can just be making things that you want to see basically. So yeah, like I say, this is just going to be sort of, I guess, my essentials video for things that I use for clay. Not everything is essentials, but quite a lot of these things are what I would say are my essentials for doing clay. Of course, if you're just starting out, you don't obviously need every single one of these things, because there's always things that you can kind of use instead of these that are cheaper to find, and that kind of thing. But it's just basically what I use. Like I say, I'm absolutely not a professional, it's just the things that I use, and if it can help any of you guys with starting out, then that's really great. So hopefully this video isn't going to be too long, but we'll see how it turns out. So I'm just going to get started, and I hope you guys enjoy this video. So the first thing that obviously is completely essential for doing polymer clay is the clay itself. So there are various different brands, but I use three in particular. So I use Fimo, I use Sculpey 3, and I use Primo. You can get normal Primo and you can get Primo Accents, which is what this one is, and the Primo Accents do some really, really pretty, like, pearlescent kind of colours and stuff, and I use a lot of those because they're absolutely beautiful. But probably out of all of them, the one that I use the most is definitely Fimo. It's my favourite. I don't really know why, I just started off using Fimo more than anything else, and I kind of just stuck to it throughout the time that I've been doing clay. So yeah, that's obviously your first essential thing. Next thing that I would say is pretty important to doing clay is having a craft knife or a blade of some sort. So I have both here, and all my tools are really dirty, so I'm really sorry about that. It's just because I use them a lot and they're getting kind of old. So first of all, I just have this craft knife, and it's just a normal standard craft knife. I just got it from a craft store, and I use that for more intricate things. And then I also have this blade, and I use that for more things, sort of when I'm doing canes and stuff like that, because it gives more of a clean cut, but it's not as easy to do sort of intricate details with, so that's what I use those for. Next is bowl tools or toothpicks. You can use either of these. Like I say, if you're starting out, you can definitely use toothpicks. They pretty much do the same thing really, but if you want to progress a little bit, I would say invest in a set of bowl tools. They're not very expensive. Like these ones that I've got, they've got 6 different sizes on them, as they have them on both ends. I don't know if they're in focus there, but yeah. And again, they're really dirty, I'm sorry about that. But they're really worth having, they're really, really useful. I use my bowl tools, I use my ball tools for making the holes to put eyes in, just so that they kind of don't fall off and that kind of thing. So I use my ball tools a lot, so they are really useful to have. But like I say, if you're just starting out, toothpicks will do the job as well. Next up is probably my favourite tool, which is my needle tool. Again, I don't know if any of these are in focus, and I'm really sorry if they're not, but hopefully you can get the idea anyway. So yeah, this is my needle tool, and it's really great for texturing cakes, if you do like slices of cake and stuff. But I use it for a lot of things. I use it for blending as well, so if you've seen my Patchwork Pals either on Instagram or on my channel here, more than the normal blending tools which you can get, I actually use my needle tool for blending on the heads and the arms and everything, and I find it works just as well, to be honest, and I actually prefer it to the blending tools that you can get, so I use that a lot. But like I say, if you're just starting out, you can also use like cocktail sticks or toothpicks, whatever you want to call them. You can use those as well, and they pretty much achieve the same kind of effect. Next up is a toothbrush, which I'm sure you've seen other crafters using toothbrushes before. If you haven't, you probably think it's a bit strange, but if you just get any cheap toothbrush, it does not need to be an expensive one at all. It's really, really great for texturing things like cupcakes and cookies and that kind of thing. I might do a video of me just texturing some different things such as cake, cupcakes and cookies, just to see the different ways that you can use a toothbrush. You can also use sandpaper, which I tend to use when I'm doing cookies. I will put the cookies on the sandpaper and then I will texture it on the top using the toothbrush. But it's totally up to you, it's personal preference. I tend to prefer using toothbrushes to sandpaper in general, but like I say, it's personal preference. You can try both and see which effect you like most. Next up is eye pins, and I'm pretty certain you won't be able to see those there, so I'm just going to zoom in the camera. So these are eye pins, which I use most of all if you want to make your clay creations into charms. You can also use head pins, which are flat on the end, but I don't tend to use those very much, as eye pins are much easier to put in, and I've never really got used to making, like bending head pins, so I would say eye pins are a lot easier to use. Another thing that you will need if you are making charms to actually hang on necklaces and keyrings and stuff, you'll need jump rings. So this is just my little pot that I've got all different sizes of jump rings in here. You only really need one size when you're starting out. I'd probably suggest the 4mm or 6mm ones to start off with if you're just wanting to get one size to keep costs down. The next thing that is really useful to have is an acrylic roller. Now you don't have to have one of these. I actually quite often use my craft knife, which isn't really the safest thing to do, so I wouldn't ever advise people doing that, but that is quite often what I use. They're not too expensive, and acrylic ones are much better than plastic ones because they don't get all the clay stuck to them. But equally, if you get ball tools that have like acrylic barrels on them, you can also use those, so you can kind of use it for two things rather than just one, if that makes sense. But that is really helpful for just flattening clay. The next thing that I couldn't live without when doing clay is my rubbing alcohol or rejuvenator fluid / spirit. It's like, basically this is one that you can use on cakes, but it works on charms to clean them up. It's really, really helpful. I just got this off eBay, like I say, from a cake decorating store. And I also use Q-tips just to clean up my charms, to get all the dust off them, because if you've tried polymer clay at all so far, then you'll probably already know that dust gets stuck in it a lot, and it's a massive pain. So this is really, really helpful. I absolutely love this. I don't think any of the last bit was in focus, and I'm really sorry about that, so moving swiftly on, pretending that we didn't notice that. The next thing that I use quite often, this one isn't an essential, but I would say it is quite useful to have if you can sort of stretch to afford it. Like I say, it's not an essential. You can kind of wait until you're a bit further on into clay if you wanted to get this, but it is something I find really useful, especially if you want to make cupcakes and make like kind of runny looking icing on top of it, and that is liquid Fimo. You can also get liquid Sculpey. I just choose to use Fimo because, like I say, I started off using Fimo and that's kind of the thing that I've stuck to the most. So that's really useful to have. Next up is something that again isn't really essential to start off with, but if you want to start selling your charms, I would say it probably is essential, which is super glue, because I found before I started super gluing in the eye pins into the top of my charms that they were just kind of working their way out as people were wearing them and stuff. I gave them to my friends to test them to start with, and they would just work their way out, and then people would lose the charms, and that's not what you want obviously if you're actually just wanting to sell your charms as well. So super glue is really important when you start actually wanting to pop your charms onto jewellery and stuff and sell them, or even if you just want to wear them yourself but you want to make sure that you don't lose them because obviously you've worked hard on them. So again, not essential straight away, but a little bit further in I would say you definitely need to get some super glue. Now obviously polymer clay doesn't harden on its own, you have to bake it in an oven or a toaster oven. I've never tried it in a toaster oven, so I'm not going to give any kind of advice on that because I don't really know how that works. I've only put it in my normal oven, so that's all I can give advice on. But you will need something to put it on, like a baking tray, and I put mine on parchment as well, so that's the next thing that I would say that you need. You need to get a baking tray or a baking tile or whatever and put some parchment on it so that it doesn't stick to it, just because obviously things might be small and they'll probably fall through like the grates in the oven and stuff, and it just makes it easier for you because you don't want to touch them as soon as they come out of the oven, partly because they'll be hot but also because they're also at their most fragile at that point and you don't want to risk breaking them after they've cooked and stuff. So get an old baking tray, that's all that this is. Again, other people might do this differently, but this is just how I do it. It's just an old baking tray and I've got parchment on it just to make sure that it doesn't stick. Pliers. Pliers are one of the probably most essential things of all, as these ones I use for like twisting my own eye pins, so it kind of saves you cost because I tend to cut my eye pins in half because they don't need to be very long as far as I'm concerned anyway. So I cut them in half and then I twist them to make new ones, and these are also really helpful for opening up jump rings, that's the word, opening up jump rings as well. So if you've got two pairs of those, it just makes it a little bit easier. You only need one really, but I like to have two. And these are some different pliers which I use for cutting wire. So I use these to cut my eye pins and head pins and that kind of thing with. So yeah, they're really helpful too. Next up is something that's kind of your choice depending on whether you want to make more realistic charms, whether you want them to be more kawaii. Just kind of depends what kind of thing, like what kind of result you're trying to get. But something I use a lot is soft chalk pastels. I use the pink ones most of all, I use them for blush and stuff, and then I use some of the browns and stuff for when I'm doing cupcakes and cookies and that kind of thing. So they are something that I use quite a lot. Again, not like completely essential, but if that's the kind of thing that you're wanting to do, I would suggest getting some of those. Then obviously to go with your chalk pastels you'll need something to like apply it to your charms, so you need some brushes as well if you are choosing to use chalk pastels. I have this really thin one which I use for putting blush onto things, and then I have this thicker one which I use for cookies, making the shading on cookies and cupcakes and that kind of thing. And it's just an ordinary makeup brush, it didn't cost very much. Something else that's kind of optional depending on how you want the end result of your charms to come out is glaze. And I had a lot of problems with glaze when I first started out. It took me a long time to find a glaze that I was happy with. I always used this one, which is triple thick gloss glaze, which I still use for certain things. I use it for glazing the tops of cupcakes, so like the icing of cupcakes and donuts, and I use it for glazing eyes and stuff because it makes them look extra shiny. However, I don't like to cover my entire charms with this glaze because I find that it goes really sticky, and I also had a lot of problems with it cracking as well. And I don't really know whether that's just me or whether other people have had problems with that as well. But it's just not something I'm happy to use like all over my charms. So I use it for certain bits, but I don't use it all over. But I do like it because it is very shiny. So for icing on cupcakes, donuts and eyes and stuff like that, it's absolutely fabulous. But then for all over my charms I use the Fimo gloss varnish, I think it is, which is really good. It's quite expensive though, that is the biggest problem with this, and to be honest it really doesn't last me very long, and like I say, it is quite expensive, but Cancer gives a slightly more, not matte exactly, but it's not such a high gloss finish, so if you want a really glossy finish with these, you do have to put it on, like quite a few layers on, but usually with like my patchwork pals and stuff, I don't want them to be really shiny. I only put the glaze on them to protect the details, so that they won't fall off and stuff, so this is probably the one that I would recommend if you don't want a particularly high gloss finish. So, and then my final things I wouldn't say are essential, but they're just extra little things that I like to have and that are kind of nice to have and helpful sometimes. So things like cutters. This is just a circle cutter, which is really helpful for things like making full cakes and stuff like that, just so that you don't have to try and make a perfectly round circle by yourself, you can just cut them out. So things like that are really helpful. I have all sorts of cutters like hearts and little stars and stuff like that. So they're really useful to have, but again, not essential to start off with. You can kind of collect these things over time. And then as well as that, things just such as moulds. So this 14mm cupcake base mould is really helpful because cupcakes are quite quick and fun to make. I absolutely love making cupcakes. If I don't really feel like making a whole lot else, I quite often just experiment with different kinds of cupcakes, which is really fun. So they're always really useful to have. And as well as that, this is one of my favourite moulds, which is like a waffle cone kind of mould, and I use this to make all of my ice cream cones. So if that's something you want to do, that's easier, or I find this easier than trying to make either my own moulds or trying to sort of make the pattern in it myself. I tried that quite a few times and it took ages and it just didn't look that good. So for ice creams, that is really helpful. So I would highly recommend these, and I got both of these from I think it's Chrissy Hearts You on Instagram. I'll leave a link to her Instagram in the description because I can't remember exactly what her username is and I might have got that wrong, so yeah. So those are all the tools that I use most of all. There are a few other bits and bobs that I use sometimes, but they're all the things that I use the most out of everything when I'm doing clay. If you guys have any questions about those, then let me know in the comments or on Instagram, like I said, and I'll try my best to answer them the best way I can. Again, I just like to emphasise that I'm not a professional or anything, and everybody kind of has their own way of doing things in clay, and there isn't really a right way or a wrong way. It's just that, like I say, sometimes people ask me for advice on how I do things, so I just thought I would make this video to kind of give advice on how I do it. If you want to experiment with things and try them out yourself and do them your own way, then that's absolutely fine too. But hopefully you found this video helpful if you're just wanting to start out with polymer clay or anything, and hopefully I'll be doing some more of these videos soon. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and also I would absolutely love it if you guys would leave some requests for clay tutorials in the comments below, as I'm hoping to do some of those really soon. I'm also going to do some character chibi tutorials, which I think is going to be really fun, so I hope you guys will enjoy those when I get around to doing them. So I'm going to stop talking now, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye guys!